anyone has a question during the presentation, please keep them in the chat box. As soon as the presentation is done, we shall address all those questions. Now, with that being said, first of all, again, I would like to thank BCICI and to be the host of this event. And I would like to welcome everyone to this event of BCICI for cybersecurity and continuous compliance in development, security, and operations, and world and big data for IT security and business assurance. But before we can, I would like to invite the chairperson, CA Ajay Kumar, to deliver a few words. CA Ajay Kumar, sir, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Shashank. Thank you so much. The speaker of the day, Mr. Altas Palani and CA Nishit Seth, the mentor of the month, CA Mahesh, dear members, invited guests, good afternoon to all of you, and Ramadan Kareem as well. Celebrating the spirit of Ramadan, this month's theme, the theme for the month of April, we have decided as the spirit of giving. So at BCICI, we have at BCICI, we have decided that we will conduct some free distribution of food during iftar under the supervision of the CSR committee. If any of the members would like to participate either by contributing to the cause or act as volunteers, please do contact CA Bharat or CA Vineet, who are leading this effort. And we have also decided that you can actually convert your commitment points as contributions as well, should you wish to do so. So this is something that we are offering during this month. The spirit of giving is also reflected in our inclusiveness drive, which means we want maximum number of members to be participating in our activities. So we are open to giving more opportunities, and I'm very thankful to CA Shashank for taking up the MC role today, and also CA Josefa, who will probably be conducting the quiz later during the session. So for taking up roles during today's meeting. And I would request more members who haven't taken any role earlier to please come forward, because I think the XCOM has taken quite a number of roles during the year. So we want to have more members participate. And obviously, you don't have to worry, because we are here to support with any assistance, with guidance, how to go about it, etc. So please do take the opportunity to come forward and participate in our upcoming events. The spirit of giving is also in imparting knowledge. So we are currently running the Excel macros workshop, and seeing the interest that we have so much, we will be rolling out another batch soon. But one request for the members, I'll probably be messaging it later on. Due to Ramadan, the offices work for shorter hours for many of the members. I know many of the members actually work still like normal hours, but there are a number of members who could also be working shorter hours. So if there are enough members to run a 4 to 6 p.m. batch, we can think about rolling out one more batch immediately. So we will be coming to you, to gauge the interest on this soon. As well as we have been generally giving out commitment points for all the events that have been activated, the quiz, etc. So which I'm very happy to see that the members are now able to actually redeem it for the workshops or even other goodies like the t-shirts, etc. that we have been giving it out recently. So so please do look out for your commitment point statements, and please come forward if you need to redeem anything. We will also be focusing on imparting more knowledge-based programs in the coming months, in line with our objective of upskilling and reskilling. So please do stay tuned for that. We have some very exciting stuff coming up. So I would really urge you not to ignore the messages that is being sent out from the BCSA chairperson number. We are also collaborating with the Indian Embassy for the India at 75 celebrations, which I believe is a 2 or 3 years long program. So as part of the activities, every now and then you'll see us coming up with something related to the celebrations. Even today we have decided to give out a deck for the members, BCSA members who are participating, which is a 75 deck slide. So these sort of things. And of course, we have been supporting the vaccination drive of the Bahrain government, and very happy to note that more and more members are now getting vaccinated. This is an important responsibility on our part to ensure that we bring this pandemic to the end. And looking at the government guidelines for the from the starting first day of Eid, I believe vaccinated persons can attend events, which among other things include conferences. So this looks, it gives us the scope to conduct a physical seminar possibly next month, but of course, following all the protocols that the government has in place. So we will also come back to you soon on this part. Coming to today's session, I'm very, very happy to have Mr. Altas Valani, who's the Director of Insights Research at Security Compass, who is joining us all the way from Canada to introduce us to the concept of DevSecOps and also the role that cybersecurity and continuous compliance has in this new phase space. And also we have, thanks Mr. Altas for joining us, for sharing your wealth of knowledge with our members. We are really excited and looking forward to your session. Um, and we'll have one more session, which is by none other than our own member, CA Nishit, who's going to be covering a very relevant topic, which is big data for IT security and business assurance. So I'm sure these sessions are going to be really value added in terms of knowledge creation, and I hope you will enjoy. Like you, I'm also eagerly looking forward towards today's session. And with that, I'd probably hand back the control to CA Shashank for taking the proceedings forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your address. So let's begin with the event. Now, in this ever-changing world of IT, be it our professional or personal lives, we have become increasingly reliant on IT, and our reliance on IT grows exponentially year to year. And the pandemic has only pushed this trend forward. It's only accelerated it. We have increased our reliance on IT, be it computers, laptops, tablets, mobile, and now even Internet of Things and those devices. So it goes without saying that these devices and the apps that we have relied on so much, they have a very good idea of who we are, and be it as a person or a professional. As we know, the information in cloud is digital gold, which is always open to cyber attacks like hacking, cracking, etc. With so many hacks on our personal information, be it email ID, our identity, our bank details, our credit card details, there's a constant risk to our personal information that's stored on these apps. How do we minimize those risks? That is, how do we ensure that the risk, if not eliminated, is minimized to the greatest extent, especially during the development stage itself? So without taking much of your time, I invite Mr. Altaz Walani to give your address, to give your session today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, all of you, for attending the session today. On behalf of the security community here in Canada, we pass on our greetings to you. What we're going to do today is present on cybersecurity and continuous compliance in a DevSecOps world. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes, sir. We are able to.
Great. Thank you. So what we're going to do is, you've already introduced who I am, a little bit about what I do.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will just ask if anybody has any reason to contact me, please don't hesitate. You can reach out to me at research@securitycompass.com. Or one of my colleagues, Jennifer Penny, is also on this webinar today. So you're welcome to reach out to her as well. What we're going to do is we will, in our presentation today, look at 4 areas. We're first going to start and talk about the context of DevSecOps. Then we're going to talk about the principles and practices and how do we implement DevSecOps and some next steps. My assumption in the presentation today is that many people will come in who may not have a deep exposure or experience in DevSecOps or DevOps principles. So the intent of my presentation is really to help inform and to educate. So let's start first by talking about what is the context of DevOps or DevSecOps. And as we go through the presentation, I will explain what the difference is between DevOps and DevSecOps. First of all, it's important for us to understand what is the business looking for. So ultimately, at the end of the day, businesses are looking at a risk management approach. And within risk management, what we have found in our work is there are 3 categories: cyber resiliency, compliance, and revenue and cost. Now, for the purposes of the presentation today, we're just going to focus mostly around compliance. But I wanted to put this slide up to help everybody understand that there are other areas being considered as well. And it all depends on the context of the business itself. So within compliance, what the business is looking for is the assurance that our compliance policies and procedures are being followed. The challenge that we have is the way that we are producing software today is moving so fast that if we try to go and put policies in place and we have to slow that process down, many businesses find themselves saying that it's getting in the way of us trying to go and move forward and be competitive. So with this tension in mind, the question is, how are we going to achieve continuous compliance? We did some research and looked at what the social communities are talking about when we discuss DevSecOps. And what we did in 2020 was just went out to Twitter and looked for DevSecOps and to find out what people were discussing. We took the information, we filtered it down, and here you'll notice the types of conversations that are taking place. So it's around things like security, we have InfoSec, cybersecurity, cyber resilience, application security. A lot of these types of conversations are taking place today. But the challenge that is immediately apparent in looking at these discussions is there's this disconnect with compliance. The DevOps community, the DevSecOps community, they are not really talking about compliance. They're not talking about risk. Now, this is slowly changing, but it's an opportunity now for those of us who understand compliance, who understand risk, to help bridge the gap and to help educate the developers and the operations people to understand what it means to be compliant. So with that context in mind, let's talk a little bit about, first of all, DevOps and the principles and practices of DevOps. When we talk about DevOps, we usually talk about a DevOps pipeline. And in discussing a pipeline, it's first important to understand what is a software development lifecycle. So normally when we develop software, there are different stages that we go through. We do requirements, and then from those requirements, we develop an architecture. From that architecture, we have several designs and we choose the best design. And then we start our development or coding. Then we move on to testing and finally delivery into our different environments, production environment, test environment, so on and so forth. Now, within each of these phases, there are certain things that we produce. So in the requirements phase, we produce some type of a requirements artifact or requirements document. Within architecture, we have our design. When we get into the design, ultimately, when we get into development, we produce some code, which finally gets put into some kind of an application that gets tested. And then we deliver. And when we deliver by what we call features. Now, this as a pipeline seems fairly simple. But if we look underneath, there's an extensive machinery that is actually taking place. A lot of these things are integrated with each other. And it's not uncommon for us to look at continuous integration and continuous delivery. These are two big phrases that you will oftentimes hear when we talk about DevOps. And we usually refer to them as CI/CD. The goal is every time we go through every one of these stages, we want to make sure that all of this is in fact taking place. Now, let me show you the next slide, which puts this into a bigger picture. What we have here, this part is what represents the diagram that we just saw. And this is the model that we are using to produce all of our artifacts into the different environments. What is different today is we've got different teams that are now interacting with this machinery. So we have development teams, we have our security teams, operations teams, so on and so forth. And ultimately, what we're trying to achieve here is iterative or incremental development. What we discovered quite some time ago is it's not possible to go in and try to deploy very, very large pieces of code because it makes testing difficult. If we find a bug, it's very difficult to go back and to fix that. So we want to try and rely on small pieces that are coming out very quickly using automation. And then we've got...
Roy ko pata hai? Did you inform Roy?
Excuse me.
You informed him, na?
Excuse me. Hello. Sorry about that, sir. Please continue.
No problem. That's perfectly fine. Okay. And so we end up with continuous feedback, and the continuous feedback helps us now to refine the code that we produce. And in doing this, we also have metrics and measurement to ensure the quality of what we're putting out. And this is the type of software development model that we are talking about today. You will, in fact, sometimes hear the idea of a software factory. So you can almost think about this as being a factory where we're producing each of these things that go out. And normally when you deal with a factory that deals with goods and services, you send these out to different customers. But here we are producing software products. And this is what the intent is. And the purpose of a factory is to go in and have something that is continuous, something that has a measured quality against it, and something that is highly automated. We did some study and took a look at what are some of the common security best practices that are out there. So on the outside here, you will notice that there are frameworks like CLASP or BSIM, SAM, Microsoft's Secure Development Lifecycle, and so forth. And some of you may have in fact heard of some of these frameworks. When you put all of these frameworks together, there are some common elements that emerge from that. And these are security best practices that are quite typically used in the production of software today. So for example, we often talk about threat modeling. We talk about things like design revisions or security requirements. So just to let you know, there's a lot of work that is happening in the industry today to try to help us develop software that is more secure. The challenge again is, how do we produce secure software while at the same time making sure that we remain compliant? So compliance could be in the form of regulatory compliance, or it may be something that we have to ensure that if there's a third-party audit that is coming our way, that we are compliant with the recommendations that have been made by that audit team. When we look at trying to bridge development, operations, and security, this is not an uncommon diagram that we see. So this is something that was produced by my good friend Hassan Yasser from the Software Engineering Institute in the United States. And what you'll notice here is we've got development, we have operations teams, and we have security teams. If you merge these three teams and the activities that they do together, we end up with Dev, Sec, and Ops. And that's what DevSecOps means. Now, if you recall, previously we talked about the development side. We plan, we go through a design, we develop, we build, we test, and then we release it. And then what happens is we have an operations team that takes over. So they deliver this into the specific environments, they operate against it, they monitor it, and there's feedback that comes in, and then we go right back into development. So this cycle here is ongoing. We used to, in the past, develop things separately, give it to operations teams, and then they would handle that on their own. And we found that that wasn't the best way to do it, because if you develop something and it doesn't match with the operational environment, then it's very difficult to deploy. That's just one of the problems that we faced. Now, when we talk about security, you will see that security is all around us. And there are specific security activities that we use. So for example, when we go and do our planning and design, we do what we call threat modeling. And threat modeling is a way to go and identify what might be the possible gaps within our system in terms of vulnerabilities. And then when we develop, we go through secure coding. There are good secure coding practices that are already out there in the industry. And then when it comes time to build our code and to test it, we use SAST and DAST. And SAST and DAST are just basically acronyms. They stand for Static Application Security Testing and Dynamic Application Security Testing. Here we do it for the code, and here we do it once the code has been produced. When we are done with producing the code, we then do what's called a penetration test. A penetration test allows a team to come in and try and break that application. So we do this, and eventually it ends up going into the operational environment, where in the operational environment, we conduct ongoing security scans, we have security audits and monitoring that happen. And if we discover anything new, then we feed that back into the development team for them to fix it, and it goes right back, it gets released, and that's how this process works. Now, you'll notice that what's missing from a diagram like this is the concept of compliance. So we need to bring compliance into DevSecOps. The question is, how do we do this? So we've gone through this at Security Compass, and in order to achieve this, we felt to go and to implement this, we've got to take a step back a little bit first. So let's take a look at this from a high level. First of all, we have certain business goals that we're trying to achieve. And these goals are generally about moving quickly, and at the same time, we want to stay safe and compliant and secure. How do we do this? We do this by enabling what we call supporting value streams. Now, a value stream is just a series of activities that we put together in order to provide value back to the business. So we have threat modeling, which I've highlighted here as an example, risk assessments, security training, secure coding, and there are many more of these things. In some of the work that I'm doing with the Open Group, for example, we are identifying additional value streams. But the goal is to go and to enable the business. Now that we have the value streams, what do we want to do, and how do we enable these value streams? So we go one step further down. And this is now where we get into capabilities and processes. So for example, if we want to conduct a risk assessment, we have to understand what it means to work within a risk framework, as an example. It could be something that's like ISO 31010, or it could be NIST RMF, any number of frameworks that exist. And from that, we identify what are the processes that we're going to use. Once we've identified these capabilities and processes, we now go one step below that. Every process ultimately has to exchange information. So we identify what are the pieces of information that are required. And then one step below that, the information that is needed ultimately has to sit in certain systems of record. So the systems of record contain the information supports the processes support the value streams support the business goals. And for those of you who may have some background in, let's say, enterprise architecture, will recognize that this model is a fairly common model that is used. We start with the business and drill down, but we at the same time also take a look at the work that's happening at the lower levels and how we might be able to enable what the business is looking for. So this is what we ended up doing. And we discovered that in order to work with compliance and security and DevSecOps, there are 4 different mindsets that you have to balance. At the top level, you will notice that it's about management. So on the one hand, we have security management, compliance management, risk management, technical management. And then at lower levels, it's where we have our engineers. So we might have a security engineer. We might have like an auditor. We might have a technical engineer, for example. And within each one of these mindsets, we have to come in from the perspective that everyone is trying to help us to become more secure and to be compliant. What has happened in the past, unfortunately, is the focus has been on just one or two of these mindsets. And as a result, for example, if we have a security engineer who might be, let's say, a penetration tester, will make a recommendation to mitigate the risk for the software, the security risk. And unfortunately, when it ultimately goes up to technical management, the recommendation that was made is not feasible. It might be too expensive. Or to a security manager, maybe looking at that mitigation would reveal that this is in fact not going to reduce the risk to the business at the end of the day. So all that effort has gone in only to find out that the recommendation itself is not actually valid. So these are some of the challenges that emerge if we don't bring these four mindsets together. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down deeper into each one of these four mindsets to give you what are the types of things that each of these types of roles would be looking for. Let's start, first of all, by looking at security management. Now, in security management, many times the focus is on risk management, and risk management is tied to different levels of risk. It could be something that is very coarse-grained, like red, yellow, green, high, medium, low, or it might be something that is more quantitative, like, for example, with the FAIR risk model that is out there. In any case, the risk informs the processes. It could be a DevOps, DevSecOps process. And what we want to do is we want to implement the right controls in order to mitigate the vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities could exist in the form of data vulnerability, security, access controls, things like that. Now, it doesn't mean that a security manager is going to deal with every single one of these things. It just gives us an indication of the types of things a security manager thinks about. But at the end of the day, what they're looking for is some report that will give them an understanding of the security posture. Now, the goals of a security manager, they're looking for this reporting that I'd mentioned about compliance risk due to constantly changing threats. There are new threats that are emerging all the time. If you look at the work that is being done by MITRE in the United States, for example, they go in and they produce regular reports that talk about some of the threats, the new threats that are emerging. So a security manager wants to operationalize the compliance against business risk and to classify and categorize these risks. So you'll notice that we are talking here about compliance and risk, whereas in the previous slide that we looked at, we saw that the discussion about risk and compliance doesn't really happen much in the technical space. And this is where the gap exists. And we're by looking at these four different mindsets, we're trying to bring both sides together. If you look at a security engineer, these are people who will go in and configure your code scanners, as an example, your penetration testers. You will have your security champions. They have a lot going on in their mind. Their focus generally tends to be around threats. How do we go in there and manage our threats, which an attacker would basically create? And the attacker would go in and they would use certain tools. And our job is to go in and to try and figure out what are the specific mitigations that we can use in the form of controls. And these controls ultimately should be something that is auditable. Now, I haven't gone through this entire slide to give you what each of these terms mean, but what I wanted to give you an idea of is you will notice here that some of the things that are on this slide were also on the security manager slide, which is not uncommon. You have a manager, the manager delegates responsibility to somebody on their team, And hopefully that team member will assume that responsibility and have information available, which they can then populate in some kind of report to give back to their manager. So as an example, the vulnerability side of things was also in the security manager's mind. So when we take a look at these things, that's how we begin to integrate these four mindsets together. The goal of a security engineer is to focus on attackers, to focus on threats, to focus on risk, for example, in the cloud or in the application space or in the entire application stack. They want to stay up to date on vulnerabilities that attackers can exploit. They're also looking for a consistent, repeatable, defensible approach to either cloud security or application security. Because cloud is so prevalent today, many times in our discussions, we find ourselves discussing cloud security. But in reality, think of this as a hybrid model. You might have some things in the cloud, you might have some things on premises, and how do you now create, from a security engineering perspective, the right controls to put in place? And the goal is also to create these configuration controls to uphold security. Now, if we look at a technical manager, someone like a CIO or a CTO, in the discussions that I've had with people in this space, their focus is largely on systems and infrastructure, which consists of computers and networks. And what they want is, for their systems, they want to know, what are my threats? And ultimately, what is the risk? Because they are, in fact, a manager that is accountable to the business, they must speak in the language that the business understands, which is risk. And that risk informs the processes that they would use. And the processes ultimately should be auditable. So again, for a technical manager, for a senior individual in the technology space, what they want to do is they want to bridge what their teams are doing ultimately with threats, risks, and vulnerabilities. Now, the good news is you will notice that we've got this whole section here about vulnerabilities for data vulnerabilities or access vulnerabilities. This is an area of overlap with the security teams. So this is how we eventually ended up with DevSecOps. Initially, it was the dev team working independently. Then we merged that with operations and got DevOps. And now we've merged that with security and we've got DevSecOps. And now this is continuing as we move forward with the business and getting the business involved to also integrate compliance and risk into these discussions. And this is now where we're evolving today in software development. And there are, in fact, some organizations where IT has essentially been completely subsumed by the business. So what that means is there is no separate IT team. The business is now responsible for software development because compliance and risk and legal are such critical aspects of software development. So for a technical manager, here are the things that they are interested in. They're looking for traceability of assets. They're looking to balance speed to market and regulatory compliance. Their goal is reduction in wasted effort. When I've spoken to CIOs, their focus is really to try and maximize the utilization of their teams. So wasted effort is a big part of it, considering that roughly about 80% of their budget is really on trying to maintain existing applications and 20% afforded to create new projects. They also want to identify the likelihood and the mitigation of incidents against critical assets. If we think now about our developers, our technical engineers, what the focus for them is largely on coding and development. So what they do is they produce software. The software runs on a given application and is a part of some system that sits on the infrastructure. And when they go in and they produce the software, they go in and they use a certain process. So we talked briefly about the software development lifecycle, But there are agile processes, there are hardware development lifecycle processes, as we see the convergence of hardware and software with IoT, for example, or process control systems. And ultimately, the goal is to identify the vulnerabilities in terms of the threats and make sure that that makes its way back in a way so that we can create our code securely. Now, what a technical engineer wants, what they are looking for, are fast delivery of features. When I've spoken to developers, it's really about pipelines. It's about factories that we talked about earlier. It's about continuous everything, continuous testing, continuous security, continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. And now if you take these concepts and expand them beyond just the technical domain, we now get into continuous risk, continuous compliance. And these are very common discussions that I find myself having with people in the industry. When we considered the 4 different silos, the challenge was historically, they didn't really work together. Each team, each individual was really focused on doing their own thing. Now, what we are trying to do within the industry is to bring all of these together. So we've got several pieces of information that each one of those 4 mindsets is looking for. So as an example, controls and mitigations for our security engineers. We might want to take a look at risk management and risk levels for our security and technical managers, as an example. Auditors are looking for something. We will have our operations team looking for infrastructure, computers, and network. And what we want is to connect all of these pieces together. So the analysis that we did at Security Compass was we looked at all of this. And once we found a model that could reasonably integrate, this really still needs to be simplified further. So we tried to look at this to say, are there certain capabilities that we can bring that would enable this so that we can help the business both go fast and at the same time be compliant, stay safe, and be secure? And we came up with the following. So in order to go and to help enable the business, there are these specific capabilities that need to be built in. We have knowledge management, risk management, vulnerability management, security controls management, audit and process management, asset management, modeling, and requirements management. Now, historically, when we've had conversations with people around security, many times they will focus on 1 or 2 of these. For example, modeling. And we might go in and say, let's talk about threat modeling. But the problem is, if you only think about this, then you're missing out everything here around knowledge management. How do you ensure that what you've discovered in your modeling activity is something that can be shared across each one of those 4 mindsets? Similarly, if you think about risk, how does risk tie in ultimately to process? And is the process auditable? From a security controls perspective, how do we make sure that the controls that we have in place help our developers who are focused on requirements management? So as we've shared this information with others within the industry, we're all converging and everybody is starting to discover very similar things now. And it's high time that we go in and we start to bring these 4 mindsets together. And that's what's going to help us to develop software securely, while at the same time moving fast. Here's what it looks like when we eventually bring everything together. Our objective, of course, is to enable both speed and risk. And this is a balance. For different organizations, there will be a different threshold for speed versus security. Perhaps some organizations that are in startup mode might be willing to have a higher tolerance for lack of security because they want to get to market quickly. So the goal here isn't to suggest that there's one right way, but it is really to describe that there's a balance that exists that is contextual. And what we want to do here is we want to go in there and bring standards teams that produce policies, compliance, and audit, and they've got their own life cycle. And they use this in that shared platform that I described earlier. Similarly, we have our developers, and the developers are focused on security requirements and threat modeling and secure coding, but they also have their own life cycle and they integrate with the model. Similarly, for our testers, they've got their own quality management lifecycle, and they focus on dynamic analysis and penetration testing and things like that. And then we've got our operations teams, as I described earlier. They focus on aspects of security operations, for example. What was missing in the past is each one of these teams was operating in their own silo. But the industry has responded now with this concept of balanced development automation. And balanced development automation tools are now beginning to emerge. They are a type of DevOps tool, but they fill a gap. Many DevOps tools or DevSecOps tools today don't really bring risk and compliance. And so these balanced development automation tools are what help you to bridge that gap. So now, while each of these teams are doing their own thing, they are in fact enabling the business. And through integration, through automation, anybody can come in and take a look and find out what is the security posture? What are our audit gaps? How compliant are we with some of the standards that we have? And that's been missing historically. So if you take a look at this kind of integrated model, there are wins for every one of those four mindsets. For the security manager, they get integration with risk management systems, with vulnerability management systems. They get a central source of truth now for security policies and controls. And they're able to achieve real-time audit reports on any control process like DevOps, for example, or DevSecOps. And the capabilities that enable that for them are risk management, vulnerability management, policy management, and auditing capabilities. If we look at the security engineers, they achieve integration now with vulnerability management systems. They also get a centralized source of truth for their policies. They're able to achieve a real-time audit and a list of security requirements and associated threats for the system's architecture. And again, of the capabilities that we had described, these are the capabilities that are in place now that can help a security engineer achieve what they want while at the same time enabling the business to move forward responsively. From a technical management perspective, our CIOs and our CTOs, they get associated threats for their systems at the architectural and at the code level. And what ends up happening is they get this centralized source of truth for security policies and controls. They also end up with real-time audit reports on controlled processes that implement their products, which are in fact software products. And if we look at our technical engineers, what they do is they come back and they're able to get the necessary security requirements. And this has been a problem for quite some time, where we will have a policy. The policy gets presented to the developers, but the problem is the developers don't know how to interpret a policy. So they go and they create code only to find out later that what they had in fact produced is something that doesn't meet the needs of compliance. So in a platform like this, what happens is the policies are converted directly into security requirements. And as these development teams are closing off these security requirements, through the integration, we now have immediately available to others on the security and on the risk and on the compliance side what work has been achieved. And they are also able to understand the threats for their systems at the architecture and at the code level. So, having described all of this, we talked about DevOps, we talked about DevSecOps, we talked about the gap that exists, we talked about what the wins would be through this integrated platform, which is already happening in the industry today. What do we do as next steps? So the first thing is, if we look at each of the 4 mindsets that we looked at, we had security management, we had technical management, security engineering, and technical engineering. Within each one of these areas, we've got certain pieces of information that are most relevant. So for example, for a security engineer, they are very interested in threat models, controls, mitigations, as we described. But if we start to take a look at the overlap that exists between security engineering and technical engineering, for example, security weaknesses starts to become really important. When we take a look at seeing what security managers and technical managers, so for example, somebody who is a chief information security officer and a chief information officer, CIO, or a CTO, they're really interested in risk management. When we put all of these together, the areas that are common to every one of these 4 mindsets really comes out to incidents, intelligence, and knowledge base. Not surprising, because it means that we have to share this information across different teams. Historically, again, this has been a challenge, but we are gradually moving in the industry to help solve this particular issue. So the goal is not to try to do everything all at once. Every organization has a fixed budget. They have a fixed amount of resources. You have to pick and choose those areas that you think are going to be most relevant for your organization. The way that we do this is by, first of all, taking a look at those capabilities that we had identified. So if you look at each one of these capabilities, they should map in some way to the business priorities. If, for example, the business is interested in compliance, of these capabilities, how good are we in using these capabilities to map to the business need around compliance? And again, this is deliberately coarse-grained, high, medium, low, or red, yellow, green. It is really intended to facilitate that initial discussion. And it may very well be that a lot of these areas could be red or yellow. For those areas, the discussion now ensues on how are we going to achieve this to support the business? Are we going to hire a third party, bring a third party in to help us? Are we going to build that capability internally? Are we going to use consultants who can help us so that we can build that capability in the long term? These are all valid discussions that we can now have. Once we've done that, then we want to make sure that we instill this shared responsibility for compliance. And the way that we do that is through some very specific operational activities. So we would, for example, conduct ongoing training. We would implement a continuous improvement, what we call retrospective or feedback. We get, not only from a process standpoint, but also from people standpoint, get 360 feedback, conduct surveys on how we're achieving value delivery to the business, and aligning these objectives and these key results. And what I've done here below is just highlighted what are some concrete ways to help guide what we're trying to do. So for example, when we talk about training, it isn't just about taking once a year type of training, but you focus on the learner, aligning their personal objectives with the business and using different channels. It might be an email, it might be a formal training session, it might be a webinar, many, many different ways of doing it. So these are all different things. And I believe if you you will have access to this presentation. So you're welcome to go in and take a look at this and hopefully it will provide you with some guidance on what are some of the things that you can do to help build this shared responsibility for compliance. Then we need to think about governance. Now, when we talk about governance, for some people that I've spoken to, they think governance is actually not a good thing because it slows things down. It stifles innovation. And this is quite the opposite, in fact. When we start to talk about DevSecOps and compliance, we need to have some kind of governance model in place. Otherwise, what will end up happening is different teams will start to do whatever they want to do. And then compliance becomes almost impossible. So what we want to do here to achieve continuous compliance is we want to start to assess our current capabilities and update any processes or tools to help improve our business outcomes. And then we want to measure it against relevant metrics. So some of the things, for example, would be what we call an escape rate. An escape rate is how many incidents made its way into production. And in so doing, that identifies a particular gap in our process that we now need to fix. So here, when I talk about governance, it's largely about the process level governance, not about the capabilities. That comes previously, which is what I described earlier. So now it's all about how do we get the teams working together with the shared set of metrics and affording this feedback loop that we can bring in now so that everybody has the opportunity to contribute towards the business value. You also want to go and to integrate security policies into your tools. So it's not enough just to have tools. There are some organizations, they spend a lot of money on buying security tools, hoping that it will help them improve their security. But what we need to do is we need to come in and we need the ability to create and codify these security policies in the tools themselves. So it starts off, for example, by identifying what are the assets that are critical to the business. When we look at the incidents that we've achieved, when we conduct a postmortem, how do we tie this into the tools that are responsible for identifying some of these gaps? And then if we assess the long-term risks, how are we tracking this against business risk? Not just what specific teams are looking for, but together, what are we doing to help us identify these risks so that we're able to enable the business at this point? So that brings us to a conclusion in our presentation today. There are a few minutes. I'm not sure if you would like to ask me any questions. Feel free to do so. I left a little bit of opportunity here to dialogue. I would welcome any thoughts, any feedback. Again, you can reach out to my colleague Jennifer. You can reach out to me as well. And at this point, I'd like to just hand it over and see if there are any other questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for your presentation. Now, there are a couple of questions I would say. Considering the increase in cloud-based apps, servers, and data stored, the responsibility for cybersecurity would be a shared one. What are the ideal things to be considered by a business itself before choosing a cloud provider?
Yeah, very good question. I recently did a presentation on this specific topic. First of all, when we talk about cloud security, just because there is a third party that is going to be managing the infrastructure doesn't negate the fact that we still are ultimately responsible for security. So some of the things that can be done, because we don't fully have insight into that cloud infrastructure, we can rely on third-party audits. So the major cloud providers do give you compliance report. So you might have a SOC 1, SOC 2 type of audit report, for example, or there are other standards that exist. For example, when dealing with healthcare data or dealing with privacy information, there are standards that exist on those specific areas. And cloud providers will give you information on whether or not they're compliant with those particular frameworks standards. Now, just because you have a report doesn't mean that it's enough to withstand an audit. You still need to make sure that you are on an ongoing basis monitoring what is going on in that infrastructure. And what I mean by this is, for example, if you're dealing with data that is highly sensitive, one of the things that from an audit perspective you could do is ensure that the information is encrypted at point of storage. So a cloud provider can give you information on security for their infrastructure, but what they cannot do is give you information on whether or not your data itself is encrypted. What you can also do is you can secure your endpoints. So for example, if you've got what we refer to as cloud to ground integrations, what are you now doing to involve your team to ensure that that is being done securely? So yes, there is a shared responsibility, but at the end of the day, even though the cloud providers do give you some level of assurance, there are still things that you need to do within that cloud environment that still prove that you are taking all the precautions necessary to continue to maintain a security posture. And I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I would believe so. Yes, I believe that answers the question. Also, sir, one more thing. Considering that organizations are going between a hybrid model, many organizations also go for hybrid model, bit data on the cloud, a bit of the data on their own personal drives. How do you see that model evolving going ahead? I mean, from the security perspective, and at least obviously from development perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So we are absolutely in a hybrid cloud model today. We used to talk about on-premises and we used to talk about cloud, but these days we just refer to that as infrastructure with the assumption that some of this is going to sit in the cloud and some of this is going to sit locally. Now,
there will not be any GT benefit.
Sorry about that.
no problem.
1 second, I'll just mute the mic.
When you fight, because you become a team resident.
Okay, the mic is muted. Please continue, sir. Sorry about the interference.
No problem at all. So what we find is within this model, there is the idea that we want to maintain the benefits of cloud, which is about scalability and speed, for example, speed of deployment, speed of creating the infrastructure. And so private clouds are also a viable option. It gives you all the benefits of a public cloud, except you've got control over the entire cloud within your environment. So coming back to the question now about data and the data that exists both internally within the organization and externally. In my experience, this is going to come down to a risk decision being done by the business. The pieces of data that we have to first be classified. They are classified by risk. How risky is it if this information were to leak outside of our organization? If the risk is really high, then generally I find that information is retained internally within the infrastructure. But if there's an acceptable threshold and the residual risk is fine for the business, then usually that creates an opportunity to move that information up into the cloud. So these are the kinds of discussions that generally take place. It is a shared infrastructure. Some of the data sits up in the cloud, some sits on premises. Classification is one thing to think about. The other thing that I've found is when talking to teams who are dealing with operations, to them, migration is a big concern. So for example, when you move into the cloud, particularly when we deal with software as a service applications, it can sometimes be quite difficult to extract all of your data if you decide that you want to move somewhere else. So you have to keep those kinds of things in mind. It is a risk. It is a vendor lock-in position. And you have to now think about what are you going to do if you have to move between one cloud provider and another, and consider the costs that would be associated with that. So when it comes to data, and identifying where that data should reside, these are the two things that I oftentimes come across. It's on the one hand about the risk, and on the other hand, it's about operationalizing it for the business.
All right. Yes, sir, that answers my question. Let me check whether there are any other questions. No, sir, there are no more questions. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Altas. Thank you for your insightful session about the DevSecOps. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Also, one more thing. Before we move on to our next speaker, our chairperson would like to make an announcement. Over to you, Ajay, sir.
Thank you, Shashank, and thank you, Mr. Altas. I think that was a very interesting session. I think, again, very concise and clear. I hope members found that very useful. I will not take much time. I actually forgot to mention about the Speechcraft program that we are conducting on the 23rd of April. So I think we are now left with very last few seats. And this is something I would encourage members who would like to improve their communication skills to take it up if possible. And as you know, this will be conducted in coordination with the ICAP Toastmasters. And ICAP, as you are aware, is the leadership factory of BCICI. Most of our recent past chairpersons are all members of ICAP Toastmasters, and many of us have really benefited, including me, from participating in the Speechcraft program. So if you would like to join and improve your communication skills in a very safe environment under the guidance of very distinguished Toastmasters who are mostly CAs, again, from our fraternity. So please do take this opportunity, and you can make the registration for the last few seats that are left in the course. So that's the announcement I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for your address. Now let's talk data. Let's talk about big data. I would say, as the saying goes, data is the new oil. One can never overstate the importance of big data. We produce nearly 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day. Now, I know that's a number most of us cannot comprehend or wrap our heads around, since it's not a number our brain is made to comprehend. Yet, that is the reality. Just to give you a perspective how massive that number is, how rich the world of data becomes every minute. Here are some facts, interesting facts. Around 1 million people log into Facebook every day. 4.5 million YouTube videos are streamed every minute. 525,000 tweets are sent out every minute, and 55,000 photos are shared on Instagram every minute. This is something happening every 60 seconds, and these numbers are only expected to expand. Nearly 90% of all the data that we have been produced over the last 2 years. While the numbers may seem gargantuan, it is only expected to grow exponentially as the years go by, and the pandemic has accelerated this trend. Now, the businesses that have embraced the data have not only survived, but thrived. And this trend seems to be accelerated by the pandemic. Now, it goes without saying that there are security concerns as well from security and assurance perspective. Now, I wish to introduce CA Nishit Seth, who has over 2 decades of experience in delivering strategic, analytical, and advisory solutions to diverse industries, including government, utilities, telecom, banking. He is currently director at SSPL Middle East, and has been earlier associated with Bettelco as a forensic audit manager. He has been associated with Substratal Solutions Private Limited and worked as a managing director at SK Seth and Company, Chartered Accountants. So with that, I would like to invite CA Nishit Seth to deliver the session. Sir, the floor is yours.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir, you are.
Yeah, thank you, Shashank, and thank you, Honorable Chairperson of the chapter, for giving me this opportunity, and to the ExCom committee. I don't know how well it could be, but I don't have too many slides to share, to be honest. And I'm trying to make it more on my personal case studies of my experience that I have seen across the world. I remember way back 1994, 95, when I started looking into data analytics. That time we used to have a desktop machines with black and white was a new incoming, and we used to have a disk operating systems, and we had a very few Pentium 1 kind of a things coming in. And people used to wonder, what are we trying to do? Somehow, after being a chartered accountant, I could not gel well with the multicolored pens we carried in a pocket with red, green, blue colors and putting the ticks with a calculator. So I ventured into this kind of what I would say, like not much demanded and looked upon kind of a sector. It reminds me of a very interesting thing. It was wonderful listening to the previous speaker and a very relevant and interesting point when we talked about analytics there, where we talked about governance, businesses. You know, where we have landed up in a major into a issue which is a good for our profession. It's a good challenge that if we try to venture into it, would help us. You know, we confused ourselves when we started in 1984 in India, something called computerization. I think if most of the senior members or you would have heard about, this is a computerized bank branch, and you could go there and happily get your passbook printed by a printer. And it took almost more than 10 to 12 years, the banks or the organization to realize there is something called automation. And then in late 1990s or early 2000s, the industry and the banks and insurance, telcos, they started talking about, let's move from computerization to automation. It's something like, you know, what is the computerization that happened? Why I'm going into this background? Because then I would like to link out with some of my case studies. Because in computerization, we just did nothing but, you know, we just automated our manual work. We removed our pen and paper and we made it computer enabled. Instead of using the pens and writing the manual edges, we were punching into the keypads and we were printing it out. Nothing more than that. And then people realize the vulnerabilities, and then they start, let us look for some intelligence into it. And to be honest, like if I look into the trend across the world, it is less than 5 years where people have really looked into something called intelligent automation. And particularly in last 1.5 years, thanks to COVID side effects. You know, it was something like, you know, a man driving at a countryside and he suddenly breaks his car because there is a villager who's crossing the highway with a herd of sheep. And, you know, with a herd of sheep, he has certain dogs also, which keeps the sheep together in the group and they keep on moving. He happily goes and a young enthusiastic man to that guy and says, if I tell you how many sheep are there in your herd, will you give me one? He says, okay. So he opens a laptop, connects the GPS, does all those gadgetry things over there. And then he says, you know, you have 125. So as per the commitment, he gives him one. So while he was going back to in his car, the guy says, if I tell you who you are, will you give it back? He says, sure. He says, you are an IT professional. So he says, how do you know that? He says, you are telling me something which I already know. Now, can I have my dog back? So he gets his dog back. That's where exactly the problem happens. The problem when we talk about security, when we talk about analytics, why I took this topic was for IT security and business assurance. We have been quite selective in doing the thing. We do not try to integrate these two important elements. If you remember 2003, 2004, when we had a great American frauds of Enrons and all those kind of things, and the American government came with the compliance rules, and nowadays also there are a lot of compliances. They came with the SOX. People started going for SOX compliance because it was mandatory. All the NASDAQ listed companies should be SOX compliant, certified by the consultant. Everything went on there. I was also called up by one of the companies whose entire audit and data processing were based out in India. And they said, what is something different you can do? I said, okay, let me know what you are doing. So they said, we run this ERP systems in SAP and we have been certified by one of the big fours, and pardon me for keeping those mask names. And we are being ready, but what's unique you can do? That is where, to be honest, was my career's first encounter, where I found that if I try to link the security with analytics, it makes greater sense in doing my things. So they said, we have the SAP system, we have the segregation of rules, we have everything laid out well. So if you have a designated or you have been given a authority up to $10,000, you type $10,000, 50 cents, it will stop you. Fantastic. One thing we should always remember with all the security and things, I don't discredit anybody, but our offenders are always 2 steps ahead of us. The only thing then I did was I said, okay, you have certain security mechanisms. You have certain rules over here. When people come to office, they log in into the system, the password controls, everything is there. Can I get the data from all these sources? The biggest challenge that as an auditor, as a consultant we have is the two most important things: getting the correct and the right data. That becomes the biggest challenge because as into a business, we do not get behind the scenes. So, you must have seen an ad which says Intel Inside. Now you can imagine this presentation was given by a very senior officer of Intel in one of the public forum. He said the ad is Intel Inside. Now who's outside, you can very well imagine. And that's what reality goes. So when I picked up that data, I said, okay, give me your entire HR dump. I would like to see who are the people who have logged in, how many people have entered your premises, who all are working from home. Even today in COVID, you're working from home, you can be well monitored using a very simple analytical thing. How much work are you doing? A lot of people I meet, they say it's very good to work at home. I just switch on, log in, and I relax. I watch the movies on Netflix and everything. But at times I do see some chats are coming, some team calls coming, I'm doing. But if you just do a couple of simple things, you can really monitor what is exactly happening. And when I get all those kind of data feeds, I just did a simple what you would do in an Excel, something called lookups, pivots, whatever commands you have. Normally, people are more driven with the commands and the technologies. I know this command, that function. More important is, do you know what you are trying to do and why you are trying to do? And once I have that kind of an objective, why am I trying to do this? Then I was able to write my algorithms. And it showed me out there are so many employees who are actually not in the system, but their logins are logged into the system. Why I'm bringing this very critical case, which is almost now 18 years old. There are so many data sets at the back of the system which do not talk to each other. You may not be physically present in the office, but if you have an SAP, Oracle, whatever ERP you have, if you have the login ID of the password of the employee, he may not be in the organization. You can still log in. How are you able to log in? Because your attendance, your logins are not integrated with your business application. So people use and they misuse those kind of loopholes, and they are still prevalent also. In 2021, I see a lot of places when I do these kind of consulting, yes, they are not talking to each other. And that's what we make to talk using analytics. And then we came out with a list of employees who were not in the system and then related that with the transactions and found out how many transactions were done. And then it came out and tell $183 million exposure done by people who were not in the system. And none of the transaction violated any segregation, but they were factually not by those people. I give you another simple example. We talk about big things. I don't like to, I'm not a big man, so I just talk small basic things. A simple thing that you could ever try using Excel, Access, anything that you want. Ever try to see, if you want to look into business assurance, how many logins per day happens from a same system? One of a very nice group internal audit head in India, he called me up and said, he was basically trying to find something different and we land up finding out something very unique. He was trying to find out while I issue a purchase order, what is the time it is taking in my system? When is a requisition raised? When is a request coming in? How much time does at each level of approval it goes through? And finally, after how many days or hours my PO is issued? We were trying to find out that, and we found out that in between there were certain steps where the time gap was less than 10 minutes. And that really gave a trigger. Why is that such a fast activity happening at this particular position only? And then when we checked into the system IP number, which is very easy now available in all the networks, we found it was the same IP number. That means somebody logged in, did his activity, logged off, and then again logged in with another password and he approved it. So we found that at a one particular place, the time lag between the transactions. A very simple analytics to see what's the time difference between two steps. It gave a very good insight of how assured you could be for this particular thing. What was the time at which it happens? Off hours, midnight, anything that could happen. Most of the analytics that we talk about are basically based on when we talk about security, when we talk about business assurance, is always based on certain past experiences. And we fail to understand that you are basically driving yourself on the past. You are not knowing the unknown. Offenders are not going to be there. It is something like, I have been working with certain state police in the country, and one of the cities which unfortunately had few blasts. I was just roaming around in a market and I found a barricading. I saw a small van of Royd police and 5, 6 people there. And I asked them, what is this barricading about? He says, 12 years back, there was a blast at this place. So I asked them, since then, are you been standing here? He says, yes. Do you think after all this barricading and your setup here, another terrorist will come and put a bomb over here? Won't he go to a better place? This is exactly what we are doing also in the business. We are just keeping thinking, what has happened in the past? Somebody manipulated purchase order pricing, somebody manipulated payment terms. We are still into all those. We are not moving ahead. Another thing that you would like to know as a business assurance, we provide internet connection to our employees. Do we ever think of analyzing the data? How many hours during my business hours, which employee is spending how many minutes or hours on what websites? You can find it out. When we talk about big data, what does the big data mean? The big data means the data coming from multiple sources. Obviously, it means like a volume of the data for sure, but it means more of coming from multiple different complex sources, and I'm able to integrate them and perform my single analytics, which will give me an answer like a story. How many hours my guys are doing what activities? They are using a Wi-Fi from my office. All their WhatsApps are there available to me. All their internet access is available to me. Their Skypes are there, their Teams are there, their Zooms are there. How many hours what they are really doing? Are they really being very productive or not? How is the system working? These are the certain interesting things that really gets down to you to make out a more valuable analytics or a business assurance to really make sure where are your resources used. We are still boiled down into double bill bookings, duplicate payments, excess payments, somewhere some penal charges not recovered. If we try to see like what are the productive real hours of your employees or your team members, and if you are able to better it out there with these big data analytics, you will better your performance, you will better your output. I give you an example. In the Middle East, I was working with a bank. I worked there for almost 4 or 5 years. Their audit head and came and said, I have my people in this particular department. I have almost a team of 36 people here. Can you do something on their IT ticketing and give me some valuable insight? So basically, he was not very convinced with the quality of work that was going in. And based on the IT ticketing, we were able to come out with a conclusion, which are the areas in which you need to train your employees. Where are they losing the time? Are they finding it difficult to work with Excel? Are they crashing the system? Right? What was the command that they used and they crashed the system? So you need to put your guys on these sector of training. And if you put them on these subjects, yes, you might improve your performance. You might improve your output from them. Normally, what is the methodology? Methodology is HR is supposed to look after the training. They will send you the mails. They will send you, I have LinkedIn online trainings. I have Tompkins. I have all these things. Please select your interest area and you please do it. Story ends. But do you really need a guy who have you given the power? What should be his exact training path? That is where again the big data comes into picture. And I can always find it out by a simple IT ticketing analytics that what are the areas which your employee need to improve, where he is repeatedly making mistakes, his system going down for how many hours. So how many productive hours are lost over there? If he would been trained better on this, you would have saved so many hours and he would have done a better job for you. That goes into it. Then we normally, the problem comes out is when we are doing certain kind of analytics, we are normally driven by appeasing. Okay, I need to make some beautiful report, a beautiful dashboard. Let me tell you something, not to discourage out anything. Analytics, whether it is big data analytics or you do the audit analytics, it is always a two-layer platform. At the back of that layer is something called ETL. And at the front of it is what today people talk about visualization. You have Power BI, Tableau, lot of technologies are there. I'm not marketing any technology. Whatever suits you good, it's always good for you. I always say technology is like buying a car. People buy Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, BMW, whatever you like, whatever is in your budget, you buy it. Similarly with the technology, every technology does a good job for you. Now, whatever makes you more comfortable, you do it. The most important element is you have a layer called ETL, extract, transport, and load, which is a very, very critical layer. This is the layer. These are the places from where you can integrate your data with the source data. Your source data could be a business data. Your source data could be even an IT security data. It could be any form, but it has to be digitally formed. And using these technologies, you are able to integrate them. And these technologies, whatever platform you pick up, are reasonably very fast today. The data even could be in the cloud. You can surely pull out those data. The most important part is, are you getting a right access? Are you getting to a right correct data? And that too, you should be getting on continuous basis. So as an analyst, as a professional, as an auditor, as a consultant, I look to this element first. And once I am able to connect to it, and I know I'm going to get a continuous feed, I would have what I want. I would be building out my logic. Now, before I get to the logic, I always hunt out answer for the two most important questions while I'm connecting to the data. I'm not getting into my algorithms or making the process or logic even before that. And the two most important questions that I look for is what I'm trying to do. I'm going to look into something called duplicate payments to the vendor, or I would look into double bill booking. Fantastic. You can ask anybody, he will come and say, you talk to CFOs, you talk to audit heads, they will give you a very good list of what they want. The most difficult question comes, sir, why you want it? That's a place where most of the people I find it going blank. Why I want it. You want to know duplicate payment. Why would I need an answer that way? Because I need an answer based on the why, I will be connecting to the data. Duplicate payment, my answer why matters might be possible. My company issues checks and my company pays online. So till date, I'm running two modes of payment. So it is possible a vendor would have given me a single invoice, but that invoice would have gone for double payment by check also and by online also. Fantastic. That means to verify this, my target is your payments. The second could be, no, I have a single platform of payment. I always pay online only, but it is possible the same invoice would have entered in my A company. And since I have the common database with my subsidiary or another company, it would have entered there also, or may not be subsidiary, but a different location of my same company. So that means in your system, you have certain places where your multiple invoices could be entered. And since the multiple invoices are entered, obviously they have been paid multiple times. I have faced that music. One of my happy clients, he was in Oracle system. They migrated to SAP. I got my first payment through Oracle. And once they migrated, I got my second payment through SAP. Something went wrong. I happily got the payment. And after 2 years, some of their statutory auditor woke up and said, sir, you got double payment. I said, don't worry. I've written already half a dozen mails to your finance. They never responded to it. They said, as per the records, it was singly paid. So there could be multiple reasons. What is an exact reason? That is what we need to know. That is why these two important questions comes. I give you another live case. Well, I came to this beautiful country, and thanks to one of your chapter ex-chairman, Mr. Kapil Batra, who got me here for some good job. While I was working for him, I made a report in my initial days. And I said, sir, as per my experience, this report is like this. So you have so many vendors with these are the exception parameters. He just added a twist to it. He says, can you give me what was the date, what was the amount, what was the material for the first PO issue to these vendors, and what was the last date and the last PO and the last amount to these vendors. So give me these 6 information to each of your exceptions. And what nicely came out of it was possibly one vendor had one company, and after that particular time, he formed another company or changed the company name, or might be shifted from SPC to WLL, and a new vendor got created. But after that new vendor, the earlier company never got any PO. There are these small things which really twist your output report while you're doing analytics. And that is why I say what and why becomes very important. Apply what and why only in the business office, not at your home. Don't influence in your personal life to ask what you want and why you want. The moment you ask this question to your better half, you would be in a difficult condition. So what we try to do is, this is the basic thing that we do. Based on that, what I say, then you go and connect out your data. Once you have the data, another very interesting thing happens. Now, when you try to do analytics, there is a concept called false positive. I hope many of you who would have been using Excel, Access, or any tool at your places, many a times you would have encountered when you go to the IT people and say, I see something on security or something on billing or a business assurance, and they come out and say, oh, it's a very high exception. Yes, so most of them are false positive. A new rule starts coming up. No, you please apply this condition. You remove this condition, you don't make it less than, you make it greater than. Any kind of modification that comes to you, and the moment you try applying it, what happens is your exception starts going down. Why this is happening? Is it really a honest, true, false positive? Now, this is my question which I've started asking in last 4 or 5 years wherever I've been working. That you challenge and say this is false positive. Are you sure these are false positive? How and what are the basis of that surety? Why I bring up this topic, it is very important. It's very nice that you people are continuously doing a lot of interesting training programs. I've been seeing the chapter in last 1.5 years, very nicely, been very well led also. While you are learning analytics, while you are learning Excel or any tools or any platforms, please always remember there is a methodology of doing the things. The methodology is, you will be surprised to know, when you do data analytics in the entire process is just 20%. 80% of your data analytics or any advanced analytics is outside the technology. It's never a part of the technology. What are those important 5 steps? And trust me, from my experience, if you follow them, I can assure you, if not 100%, at least 80 to 90% success in the single shot. The first step is, as I just explained in bit of the depth, what and why, we call it planning. I need to plan what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do. Based on that, I should be very authentic about the data that I'm going to connect. Is it right? Is it correct? Is it clean? Or does it need some kind of massaging? Don't take the other side of the massages. Get to the technical side of massages. So is that massage, is the data requiring? Once that is ready, once your data is massaged, it is healthy, it is ready for it, for your audit, for your analytics. Imagine you are still not started with analytics. You have done 20, out of the 5, you have done 2 steps. The third step comes that I try to find the integrity of the data, where I will look into certain parameters. My business rules should be very clear to me. If you are trying to look into changes in purchase order, what kind of changes am I looking? What is the process in which the purchase order can be changed? Or if I'm looking into billing, what is my methodology of the billing? Please have that business rules documented, written on the paper, and signed off from the stakeholders, the people who are possessing. Could be your auditee, could be your departments or whoever it is. We miss out this element of getting it signed off. And this is the place where it is being played when you come with the analytic output. Sir, this is the where you made a mistake in your process test. You should have added this condition also. I would like to emphasize and I would like to put a pressure over here that instead of going to my auditee or to my owners of the process or things, I would like to find out from somewhere reliable source, what is an organization policy for this particular process? If the POs are to be amended, POs are to be changed, under what all conditions, what all are the things which can be changed in the PO? Can you change a price? Can you change the vendor? Can you change your quantities? Can you change the payment terms? I would like to know exactly what is the organization policy and then apply that organization policy into my analytics. That is my level 4. And before I start doing that, I write my simple English steps on a paper. I write like a very layman person. I am going to bring in vendor master table. I would bring in PO master table. Then I would bring in a table with requisition date. I would relate or I would create a lookup or pivot between these 3-4 tables. And my condition is that your requisition date should not be after your PO initiation date, whatever conditions you want to write. These columns should not be ever changed in a simple English. I don't expect even myself or anybody to keep getting on the technical code because we are basically finance guys. We are not IT guys. Once I've done those kind of steps written on the paper, then I can open Excel, I can open Access, I can open any tool. And what I do is I straight away apply. Let me give you a logic why. I hope most of you people have been using Excel a lot. Although we are in a virtual environment, I do presume your answer to be yes there. In an Excel, you can just see one sheet at a time. You could have multiple sheets in your Excel, but when you open it in your laptop or your desktop screen, you just see one sheet at a time. You can keep on moving from one to the second to the third. But while you are writing your data on the paper, while you are writing the table names, you're writing the field names, you're writing the conditions, I can see all my tables together on a single sheet on a paper. I can easily with a pen and a paper make it out. Okay, this is vendor master. I have a vendor code here. This is my material master. This is the material code. Which column which have the common matching column to whom? What is the architecture I'm going to design? Which lookup am I going to have? B, H, Z, X, Y, whatever it is. I could do that thing much better on a paper. Trust me, you start writing your analytical steps on the paper, it will make your job much easier. You will be able to see it on a paper that I'm writing 7 steps to do the thing, but I can surely do it in 4 steps. I can do it in a 5 steps. Your mind will be working to optimize it. And then the concept of doing more with the less comes into the picture. Once you have written those steps and you apply, and thereafter you get an exception, you will always have a very relevant argument when you go back and share your exceptions or the report. You will have everything on the paper and things, and you can argue and say, this is the policy, these are the conditions, I have done it. You need not click on the Excel or macros or anything to do. Your paper will start speaking you more, and your output would be much better. So whenever you are getting into it, please, my dear professional colleagues, friends, try to follow this. It might give you a better result. But if you have any trouble or any problem while doing it out, yes, I can help you out to it. I'm so sorry, in all these things, I forgot to switch on my PPT. So there are one of the things that I would surely like to share for my PPT with you is a very important slide that I always feel is related to how do you really make a mature model? This one. I hope you are able to see my screen. Yeah, Shashank, my screen is visible. Okay, you are muted.
Yes,
But
yes.
I
Yeah,
could do
that's visible.
I could do a lip reading of Shashank that he said yes.
Excellent. Yes, sorry, sir. Yes, yes, the screen is visible.
No worries. Thanks a God for the video. At least some lip reading helps. Now, when we
Thank
are
you.
making out any kind of a maturity model, this is the very important steps that we normally follow. Because why I'm trying to bring it in here, I have very good friends around in the industry, and they come out and say, we want to do it, but how should we proceed? What should be our methodology of doing it? As because of the COVID, now more emphases are coming of creating automations, creating RPAs, bots, robots. Things should automatically happen at a click of a button, or you need not even click a button. The system should do it with great intelligence. It is possible. I don't deny it's not there. But you need to understand there has to be a life cycle. I hope people who have done CISA, DISAs, they would have learned and heard about software development life cycle. Similarly, when we are talking about today advanced analytics, it has a life cycle. And the life cycle happens is we need to first step is focus on our basics. What are we trying to do? This is what I was doing in Excel. We used to come to our offices, open up the laptops, desktops, and this is what we used to run. And this is what it was. The best approach is, first of all, make your daily routine basic thing automated. Try to remove something which has manual intervention. Don't become a slave of technology. Try to make technology your slave. You should be able to dictate a computer and say, this is what I've been doing on daily basis. I have been, if I'm in a procurement department and I'm getting all the RFP documents and I read them, I make a JER, joint evaluation report, and then I start negotiating and talking. I don't want to do that. Can a system help me? Yes, system can help you. Make a bot out of it. The bot should be intelligent. You should program on 15th of April at 3 p.m. This tender will close. At 15 past 3, the bot will wake up, go to the folder, pick up all the tenders. In less than 1 minute's time, it will generate an output and it sends you a trigger. Here it is. And now you have all these things ready. You please start negotiating. Why should I read that? Similarly, if I'm doing any analytics, I'm looking into businesses, there are certain daily routine work that we all are doing. Whether we are in operations, we are in finance, we are in audit, or anywhere. Please make that as level 1 manless. Once you have done that, you have applied certain things. Don't jump too fast. Monitor it for some time. That is level 2. I have applied certain automation. I have removed my manual intervention. Let me see what happens. You will have certain teething problems. You will have some issues. Try to mature that. You should be able to be expert by that time that you reach level 3 and you know how I manage this automation. If I've done all these things, if some problem happens, I know how to manage it. And once you're able to manage, you will be able to create into it something called error handling logic, which is a very important element. Okay, if this error happens, this should happen. Something like, I give you an example, if I'm extracting data from huge systems like Oracle, banking, or in telcos also, I built up a data extraction which will keep on extracting data every 1 hour. One of my case study was every 15 minutes for a US company called Walmart. The CFO wanted every 15 minutes. My data should get refreshed. I have LED screens across my floor. And these are my 5 most critical parameters. And I should get a stock exchange of view running. And there should be a clock on the right side corner saying 10 minutes to refresh, 5 minutes to refresh. And the report should keep refreshing. While we did that part, there were certain teething problems in getting the data refresh and all that. There were multiple platforms. They had SAP, Oracle, they had Navision. They had an IT security ticketing data. So we pulled up, managed it. And once we were able to know these are the common things happen, then we built up the logic. Okay, if this data is not refreshing because the backend data is not ready, it will automatically generate a trigger, send it to CIO, send it to certain people that this table is still with a backdate. It is not been refreshed. It's not been updated. Please update, process is stopped. The guy knows, okay, this has been there. If they gave us a liberty, we said we can build a logic which will automatically go and refresh your data also for you. So that is where I say I have done my error handling. Now I know how to manage the application. Once you have reached that maturity, you come to the real RPA, what people today are talking about an RPA at level 4. Now I can say I can make robots because I know how to handle everything. You will be able to convert all the development of level 3 into 100% manless mode as your automated thing. And then what I do is, the last step, I keep monitoring. There is something called analytical life cycle. We always believe one small thing, that I have developed the module, I have done the analytics, now I have the reports coming, I should relax, this will keep on going. No. Every analytics has a life cycle. How do you know the life cycle is over? For an instance, if you have some kind of a business assurance analytics, something on even, vendors have been always a vulnerable area and a lot of frauds have been happening there, or even in the banking. I have certain reports or certain parameters set and I had an exception level. Based on my exception, the business took certain decisions, they implemented controls. And because I'm on level number 5, I'm continuously monitoring these reports. And over the period, I find now my trends are going down. I'm not having that high exception. And finally, you come to a level that is called a audit risk or a business risk area, and your exceptions are within those parameters. This is an acceptable risk for me. This exposure is done. Obviously, I cannot have a zero loss or zero revenue loss kind of an organization, but this much of losses is acceptable. Materiality is not that great for it. That means now you need to move further. That analytics is over. Now you have secured, you have controlled that area, but that does not mean that you don't ever visit to it. You can always go back after might be a quarter or a 6 months and revisit once for a while and see, is the exception still low or not? I give you a fantastic case study, 2005, 2006, almost like 1.5 decades back. I can name here my customer because the customer allowed me to do that. And this was within Mumbai with a company called Godrej Industries. Godrej in itself has almost, I think, 8 or 9 companies within the group. And we were working with a group internal audit head. He said, Nishit, you know what is my approach of doing it, or any other audit people? We always gather our people in a room and we say, okay, let's create an audit plan for the year. And everybody with their own imagination and thought process will come. So this quarter we should look inventory, this quarter we should look sales, here we should look expenses. I don't want that kind of manual thinking subjectivity coming. He was talking in 2005. Can there be a system which will give me a trigger in which quarter I should be able to focus on what area? Which area becomes vulnerable? Now for doing that, yes, we had to go back to the historical data. And I went back to almost 5 years data to see every quarter, every area, what is your exception movements? And you get a trend out of it. Based on that trend, then you build a intelligent system which will go to the current data, look for exception, map with your past history and tell you, boss, next 6 months, these becomes your vulnerable sectors to check. And within them, these are your vulnerable accounting heads, customers, vendors, whom you should focus. Trust me, he brought down his on-site audit from 12 days to just 4 days. So imagine how he was able to. Now that was something called in that time called, predictive audit analytics, where you could predict or you could use the technology to tell you what should be your next areas of audit. And that's where it happens. I give you another life thing where we talk about monitoring. In banking, a lot of people have a concept called KYC. KYC is something like know your customer. What does know your customer means? I give a long form, please write your name, please tell me how many are your legally known wife, how many are your legally known children, what is your income, where do you work? That's it. No, that doesn't bother me. If you ask me as a business analyst or even from any point of view, I said, fine, he has given it. First of all, I have no place to go and verify that. I'm not going to his house and say, okay, you said Mrs. So-and-so is your wife. Can you show me who is she? And she will come and say, yeah, I'm Mrs. So-and-so. I'm deliberately not taking any name because by chance the name clash with somebody, I will get into some IPR problem. So I said, sorry, I can't do that. Neither I'm going to do when I have such a huge population. What is know your customer means? The know your customer means each one of us today here on the call, or each one of us who's having a bank. We have a style, we have a trend of doing banking. We have a lifestyle of doing banking. If somebody is working on late nights or BPOs, obviously that person would be doing most of the banking during the late hours and he would be sleeping in the day. If you go back and look into not more than 6 months of your banking statement, take an electronic form, download in an Excel, you will be surprised to see your own trend. What is an average amount per month you use on the credit cards, on debit cards, how much you pay back? After you get your credit card bill, are you paying regularly within 1 week, 4 days, 10 days? There would be a trend. Date, time, which day of the week you do maximum banking, which day of the week you don't even do any banking. On so many parameters, you make real know your customer thing. That's the way to use technology. And that's where the use of big data comes. I know about all these things. Today, my GPS position is easily shareable. It would be wrong to say that, no, my banker does not know my GPS. You open your laptop, open up Chrome. Chrome will tell you. I open up Chrome here, it says you are in Bahrain. It will by default show all my things into BH or USD. It does not show me INR. So my everything is being captured and known. If I know your banking style, I know your banking thing. Once for a while, I just take your 2 years data, 1 year data, create that numbers, plant it onto your real-time system, and let the system do the job. You can put a buffer of 25-30% variation. And then what will happen? The system will keep telling you that the moment your customer will violate the lifestyle, it would generate an alert and you can send an alert to anywhere you want to. You can have it on mobile, you could have WhatsApp, you could have your emails, anything you want today. And then you get into an action mode. And some of the banks, without naming them, they started implementing. And the moment you may not even come to know that you are monitored, the moment you violate your KYC, at times you are standing at a ATM, you are trying to withdraw some money, you might find a slow delay in your release of the money, which could be possibly, I'm not talking about Bahrain, but where I've done, it would be possible that you are violating your time zone. You have never done an ATM at that hour of the night or the day, or the amount that you are trying to withdraw was not in line with your normal trends, and might be possible the location from where you are drawing your ATM is not your normal ATM usage location. If any of these 3 parameters in that particular logic violates, it gives out a trigger and say, please see. And what happens is the call center immediately makes a call to that card holder. Sir, are you trying to withdraw X amount? May I know your location? Verifies everything done. Then they press the button release and the ATM works. Similarly, it could be with telcos. That's the way you can use your big data coming from so many sources together, which is now shareable. And you can make your business assurance. You can be sure about your things. Yes, everything is in order. And before you really lose anything, you could be done. Another ATM could be even your ATM machines. You have a cache over there. You could have a predictive thing. In next 4 hours, these are the ATMs, could be in Manama, could be Seed, could be Arad. This dimension of your currency is going to get finished off. And in next 4 hours, this is the demand going to be there. Please plan to replenish. You could create an intelligent bot which will just send the signals to everybody. Please make sure you fill this 10 BD, 5 BD, 1 BD currency in these kind of ATMs. They are going to be finished off. I could make those kind of intelligence. That's where I say you start doing now monitoring part. The most important is how do we utilize our brain and think for making those monitoring parts. So this is, ladies and gentlemen, a very maturity model in which you could build your analytics. And as I always say, you should try to link try to link your IT security also with it. The moment you bring security element to your business assurance, you really create an assurance. People are being misusing it because your security is separate and your business is separate. So that way it helps you out to do the thing. While we are doing it, I will just take, I hope Shishanta have just less than 5 minutes with me. This is something I just want to tell, how do we really make step-by-step best practices. Shashank, do I have 5 minutes?
Yes, sir, you do have. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. While we are doing this, as I just explained about the maturity things, what are the best practices of implementing while you're on the floor? As I said earlier, yes, you should surely look into your scoping very thoroughly. Try to get to the right critical data. The most important word is critical data. Don't pick up all the data. Every data that you need may not be your requirement. Once you have done that part, the very important thing that could happen is extract and obtain the data thing. How well are you able to extract? This is the element where extracting and importing, you should be focusing more on seeing the consistency and its correctness. If you ask me, when I built out any kind of process, I put a lot of logics into these two sectors to make sure every time it just keeps on extracting and importing, it is the correct data coming. Data corruption is one of the another very common problem in your analytics. You might really get off it to it. Whatever technology you use the most, there are certain technical parts of it. You know, if by chance in future your data increase or decrease even by a single character, you were extracting a data which had almost something like 180 characters in a single row, but sometime it went to 178, 79 or 181, 182, your data corrupts. Small technical things happen. This is the area where you really need some good technical support so that you are being done there. And yes, you would be knowing the business rules. You have the business people, do that part, and then you manage your false positives. And in visualization, the last step happens. What I just like to take in the next 1 minute is visualization. What is like visualization? A lot of people come out and say like, yeah, I have Tableau, I've got Power BI. I would like to have a beautiful visualization. Surely you should have a beautiful visualization. Everybody wants that to be beautiful, colorful, with all the things. What is visualization? Visualization is talking to the data. That graphical presentation that you see, besides being beautiful, should have a brain also. It is transforming your Excel numbers, records into a more easily understandable graphical output. So it is basically talking to the data at the back and showing you something which your eyes and your brain can correlate and interpret it very easily in a meaningful form. That is called effective visualization. Trust me, as you can see, any industry designs and things, it's very easy success stories to be shown, demos to be done. It is equally difficult. Why? Besides your business and technical knowledge, it needs creativity. If I'm making any kind of a visualization, I need to add to my brain, what am I trying to show? Is it going to give me a meaningful input? What am I trying to look? Let me show you one example of it. So I hope my internet does not spoil my thing. It just stuck to my mind now, so I just open it up, although it's been made in Power BI. So while designing all those kind of things, you have to think what is the most critical part of your business? How is that to be seen? And if I'm basically trying to do some further analytics to it, or I want to make some changes, I want to have some elements where I can pull up and I can drill down, what should be those kind of things? So this is something, where I just happen to create it out. I made out like a multi-industry kind of a thing where, you could have multiple industries and you could use something like, I take my favorite topic like procure to pay. So in a procure to pay, I have multiple things here with me. So I have vendor masters and all those things. If I get into my vendor master, it will then what I do is I make a visualization which shows me a summary. Now it's individual perspective. How do you see? I always see that visualization should at a glance, if I am a CFO or if I am a senior person, it should at a glance give me some macro numbers on the top. And from these macro numbers, I should be able to understand what exactly are my exception numbers or my business numbers. If I say, okay, I have got one-time vendor 2017, 18, 19, oh, 18 went pretty high over there. I have open invoices. There are 25 invoices. This is an amount where my open invoices is $67 million are there. I have paid 427. I love to look into it. So basically what is there is, as a user, I bifurcate one-time vendor into two parts. There could be one-time vendor whom I've already paid, and there could be one-time vendor who I yet to be paid. What does a one-time vendor mean? One-time vendor by the name means I just do transaction once. Am I doing it repeatedly? What is the volume I'm running? Which vendor am I trying to do? So based on why am I looking into it, we built a lot of variables on the top of it. I can look into year, or I want to look for certain vendor names here. Or if I have a purchase order numbers, I can look into my document numbers. This is for open, similarly for the paid. So I can always look, this is the money already gone, this is the money yet to go. Is that something I can stop? I can say, oh, seems to be a difficult one. Please don't release this one-time vendor payment. This is not correct. The moment some systems try to give you a premature or a early alerts, that becomes your predictive. It is predicting to you, it is giving you a trigger. Yes, please don't do this. It is exception. And if I'm able to stop, yes, I'm able to achieve my objective. So while you are getting into these kind of visualization, you need to be highly also creative about it. And you don't learn to this level at a first shot. It is always again a journey. And I always believe keep doing as much as you can. And as my concluding remark, I would always say for technology and to my professional colleagues, don't ever hesitate to do any experiment on technology. Please go open, go bold, go wild in doing it. Unless and until you hammer your machine or your mobile, nothing gets lost, nothing gets destroyed. You can always come back. Thank you very much. Thank you bearing with me, and thank you, Honorable Chairman. Thank you, Shashank, for inviting me here. Wish you a very happy and a pleasant weekend ahead. Ramadan Kareem to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. It was very insightful. Thank you very much, sir. I now request CA Josefa to conduct the quiz, and I hope everyone is ready with the Kahoot app for the quiz. CA Josefa, now the stage is yours.
Thank you, Shashank. Let me present my screen.
Yes. Yes.
I hope everybody can see.
Yes.
So let me read out the
Yes.
pin 1498657.
So name and membership number. That's the format. Yes, Rajesh has got it right. See, a couple of people have not given their name and membership number. So I guess they're playing for fun.
It didn't ask my membership number.
So it will ask for the nickname where you can set the name and the membership number. So I'm going to start the quiz. Here we go with the
Josefa,
first
you're
quiz.
participating as well as the quiz master.
Sorry?
You're the quiz master as well as participant.
I was checking whether I can enter my name, but don't worry, I'm not going to play.
What is all those? Yeah.
So the right answer is research director. I'm going to next one.
You can put it on full screen.
Okay. The right answer is InventTS. Which is not an Altaf's personal interest mentioned in his profile.
You're making sure people read the profiles.
Yeah, I think they should know the at least the presenters. Great.
Sharmila
Next
is not.
one.
Sharmila?
I'm just playing for fun actually.
Okay.
It's okay if I play, right?
Yeah. You have insider information.
Not that everybody has.
Here we go with the next one.
Not security practice.
That's right. Here we go with the next one, which is not a balance for mindsets. So right answer is asset management. Here we go with the next one, which is not a wins for the security management. That is the question. Yeah, so most of the people have got it right. So this is a double point question. In yesterday's Taste of India Vishu celebration event, which recipe was not presented?
That's a googly.
Yeah, most people have got it right. Shamila is still leading. So, which is the correct email ID of Nitish?
Oh my God. That's a
Nishit.
personal question.
Yeah, most of it I've got it wrong. So here we go with the next one. Which is not a Nishit's academic qualification. That's right. Most of people have got it right. So, how many books are authored by Nitish? Yeah, most people have got it right. So the next few are from the presentation which Nishit has done it. So what are the challenges for advanced analytics? Select all the correct options. Yeah. So business process is not the relevant one. Last three, which is not a key step, fraud detection. Yeah. Testing is the relevant answer. Last two, which is not a new challenge for advanced analytics solution. Benchmarking was the relevant one. And here we go with the last one. How many maturity levels are of advanced analytics model? That's right, 5 is the right answer. So that's it from my side. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Shashank.
Okay, you should show the
Welcome.
winners. Share the screen. You show the final winners.
Yeah, let me. So Bala is the winner.
Second, third place.
Yeah, and the first place is Sharmila.
Disqualified automatically. Anyways,
Yeah.
thank you guys. So Shashank and Josefa, well done. I hope you found the experience useful from your side as well.
Yes.
Like I mentioned, I think we welcome more members who have not taken part in any of our activities, to either come forward as MCs or people who want to conduct a quiz, any other manner. So, we really want to reach out in the remainder of the term to members who have not so far participated in any of our events. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nikhil. Interesting.
बेच check करो ITS में.
उठो जल्दी.
Next session.
शो आगे गया already.
I think okay, cool. So I think that concludes the session. I think we have closed bang on time. So I think iftar time for everybody who's fasting. So we'll probably close the session now. And thank you again for everybody for joining in large numbers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.